Are you ready to learn more about the blind spots that you might be missing, especially as you're scaling your business? This is the Scale You podcast, where every single season we bring in a lot of amazing guests and diving into being an entrepreneur, being a digital nomad, having multiple businesses. And for this season, we're focused on a lot of people who have written books and published books, basically scaling themselves and their ideas through the written word and diving into what they've learned and why they wrote the book in the first place as well. I am your host, Lacaba. I'm the co-founder and CEO of 2XU, which is we're an executive assistant agency here in the Philippines. And I'm also the author of the Scale You book, which just came out last February. So if you're ready to just ditch the grind, let's go over and scale you. Now, our guest today is a seasoned brand strategist, creative director, and founder of Tropoly with over 25 years of experience in design, storytelling, and strategy. He has worked with startups and global brands alike, helping them transform their blind spots into strategic advantages through innovative branding and audience engagement. Beyond his consulting and creative work, he is also the author of Blindspots, the Marketing Handbook, a game-changing guide for small businesses and marketers looking to sharpen their instincts, uncover hidden pitfalls, and create smarter, more effective campaigns. Whether he's building brands or writing about them, he delivers insights and creative executions that help businesses find those competitive advantages. So guys, please help me welcome our guest today, Brady. Hey, Brady.
Hey, Leanne, how's it going?
God, excited to have you here. Before we hit record, I told you I'm a huge marketing nerd, so I'm excited for talking about your book, talking about what you do. But of course, take us back to who Brady was before all of this and kind of what brought you here.
Oh, awesome. Great question. Thank you so much for letting me be on this podcast. I'm excited about this too. And I love, everything I do is marketing. So I can talk about this all day long and nerd out, to the nth degree. But I'd like to, dive in and share as much sort of valuable content to your audience as I can. So I think if you go way back, I always kind of knew I always loved marketing. I always loved design. I always loved, visual, how the world, deals not so much as much as it deals in language, in sort of literature, and sort of linguistic language, but also visual language. I always loved the storytelling of, how we use visuals with photography and film and all that to tell those stories. And I always was very sort of attracted to that. And that was just one of those things I kind of fell in love with. So I went to school for marketing, for branding, worked in the large agency world from Toronto, Canada. So that was, worked in the agency world for about 8 years. That was great. But, as all entrepreneurs know, there's always that kind of itch, as much as you want to, you enjoy working for people, you always know that someday, somehow you need to kind of go and do it on your own. And that about 25 years ago is when I kind of jumped ship from the large agencies, and I just started my own. So started small, doing little freelance gigs. And it's fortunate because the world of design and marketing, you can kind of start off small. You can kind of get those little small projects and build from there. So I started from literally I had a bachelor suite in downtown Toronto. So literally I was, my desk was right beside my bed. It was kind of, you could sort of, you stretch your arms out and touch every room in the space. And, that's where my desk, in my office was to begin with. And then from there, it just kept growing. And, I hired my first person. That's when I got a 2-bedroom apartment, and it was just offices didn't really seem like much like something at that time. So I really wanted, I didn't think it was big enough for an office. I looked at the rents of office versus I could get a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom versus an office. And I was like, okay, this can do. So, let's just say I lucked into a larger apartment, somehow. And, that 2-bedroom, the 1-bedroom was an office. So I had myself and another designer there. And then another salesperson kind of decided to join. So at the end of it, before I actually decided to move into a real office, there was 4 people working from my house, which is great from a value standpoint, from a budget standpoint of how much goes out. But from how much, if you're sick one day, it's sort of or anything else, you can't call in sick when everybody works from your house. So that's where it started. And then from there, I just kept on growing it. Now I run a full-fledged kind of agency. And one of the things why I'm here today is I decided to kind of, I was inspired to write a book because about 4 years ago, I got literally within the same week, I got 2 calls from some friends of mine who were in trouble with their designers, with their contractors. And from there, I was like, oh, these are really probably very common issues that everybody kind of runs into or will run into. The first one being that in a panic, my friend called and said, hey, listen, our designer, we called our designer to have our new brochures updated. We have some new photos and all that stuff. And the designer called back and said, sorry, we don't have the brochure anymore. Our hard drive crashed, so we don't have anything. And my friend was like, what do you mean you don't have anything? No backups or nothing? They're like, sorry, the computer crashed. It's gone, so sorry. And I just ended up kind of walking away. And my friend called me up and said, what can we do? And I'm like, I said, the first question I asked them was, well, where's your copy of it all? And you get that blank stare of like, what are you talking about our copy? Like, and that was just like, you can have your, like, that's one of those things about having backups and everything else. And this was thousands and thousands of dollars of hours and of assets, of photos, and all the sort of all the work that they've done over the years. And then within the same week, another friend of mine called because she had found some illustrations that she used in a book that we designed for her on a website, for like the illustrator to use these beautiful designs on some pillows and some other sort of things within an Etsy store that he created. And she's like, these are my designs. I paid for these. And I'm like, well, who owns the creative rights to these? Like, did you, where's the licensing? And she, again, that blank stare of like, what do you mean a license? So in that, there's those two things that, when creative people, people are working with designers or photographers, videographers, illustrators, there's those things that, kind of, if they're not sort of talked about, they might be assumed. And in that, the assumption of, the first one might, our first friend assumed the designer would always have their files on hand and always have the backups and everything else. And so small things like that. So this inspired me to start writing a checklist. And then that checklist got a little bit bigger. And I started talking to friends and past clients and everybody in the industry. And, what turned into, from a 8.5 by 11 sort of, 20, 30, item checklist is now a 114 page book of things. And just the insights and lessons learned that we've all kind of gone through. I wouldn't say, the school of hard knocks, but those things you can kind of only learn, when you're in the business, when you're doing stuff. So I'm like, how come we don't learn this stuff in school? How come some of these things aren't sort of ever documented or told to us? And I just realized there was such a gap. There was, there's nothing, no practical advice of, optimizing, your productivity when it comes to marketing, how to interview, how to hire the right designer, how to hire the right contractor, how to get the most out of your project from a budget or time standpoint. So I was like, man, this is, I wrote the book I wish I had, 25 years ago. So that was kind of it. So that's big for me.
Very cool. I by the way, love your cover. Like I love the little like eye tripping someone over because I when I saw that, I saw the funny symmetry. Like sometimes it's us that we trip ourselves over our stuff that we don't see. So that was perfect. When I saw that, I was like, oh, I wonder if this is just like a plain marketing book. But when I read the description and I read more on like your website as well, which I'll link below. I was like, oh, this is what this is like for someone who has never done it. And for me, like part of my background is I did at one point I was a graphic artist, at one point I was a video editor, at one point I was a marketer. So like all of those backgrounds of like, oh yeah, no, this is something that on the flip side, freelancers or people who do this basically for their like living, they could be like, oh, I'm hired, I'm hired, here's my onboarding, read this book. It could also be easily that for them. So that's really, really cool that you wrote it from. And it's usually that way, like when two crises is like, oh, is this like a coincidence or is this a sign? It sounds like you took it as a sign. So it's perfect. All right, so I want to dive in.
I was going to say, one of the things to add is someone came back to this really great quote and this really great saying is that, a blind spot isn't what you don't know, it's what everybody else assumes that you know. So with those projects, when you're working with it's whether or not, with a contractor designer, it's just like when people assume that you think things, or you think that what you're getting into. And those things, I even go back to the original title of the book. It was, I wish I knew that before I started, kind of thing. And that was, those sorts of things. But that's exactly why. And it's also kind of written in a way that, rather than taking the contractors, I wrote it for the small businesses, because I think also they have the most the most to lose, whether or not it be time or budget or investment in their projects. And that's I've seen a lot of really great small businesses get sidelined, or it's just, it really pushes them back, because when, for instance, a bakery is opening up and they want some signage, or they need a new logo and all that stuff, and the contractor doesn't come in, doesn't deliver on time, it pushes everything back for that small business, because they might have not just asked you how long things take, or they would have found another supplier if they would have known that, the supplier takes this amount of days. It's all those sorts of things that the small business owner doesn't know to ask, or doesn't. And that's to their detriment, unfortunately, because they're still paying rent on the space, or they're still they're the ones with the biggest investment in this whole sort of scenario.
Very, very true. And I love that that's kind of the who you wrote this for, because like I said, it's so perfect. Like for like freelancers, or people who are doing it basically either as their business or just as a service, like they hope that they know what you basically wrote in your book, because of course for business owners, they just don't know what they don't know. Like they have this assumption, and it could have been that it was even a referral, like, oh, this person's amazing, blah blah blah, but it wasn't a fit for their business. It was a fit for their friend, but not for their business. So there's also that back and forth. I want to dive into, and I love the imagery of your agency as well, and I want to get a little bit of like, how did you get to where you're at on that end, but basically became this how the book became to be. And I love the picture of basically everyone kind of coming to your condo, because I also did that the same way. Went away during the pandemic, which now my business is fully remote just because of that one thing. But like I remember, I think at one point I had like 10 people working out of my living room, just because like you said, it's a great way to kind of, one, save on rent. Two, it's also a great way to kind of foster, like, hey, they can just get stuff from the kitchen, they can take a rest if they need to. So tell me more about that growth. Like, how on the business side, how are you able to grow and basically just scale yourself through that?
One of the biggest things is I had some really great mentors. Is that's kind of winging it's one thing, and reading things is another thing. But when we read things, and it's sort of even going back to when you get a referral from somebody, it's like there's just so in that I really had some sort of, maybe they kind of simplify this, I had some really great mentors that I asked right from the beginning of, like, okay, how do I do this, and what steps do I take? And everyone I spoke to was like, okay, don't invest in the big things until you absolutely have to. Don't get that, don't get your office until you have to. We're all sort of like wanting the big shiny space or the newest equipment and everything else. And it's kind of like, if, it's just, sometimes you just have to know that it's worth it. And for me, it was, asking my, not to say that they were the naysayers and a lot of things, but they're like, reach these peaks first. Like, you should be here first before you do that. Or it's the projections of your business should be at this level. Because we all kind of want the perception of, the office space, or, being seen as bigger than we are, all of that stuff. So, and it's, at this point too, I think with everything, the kind of pandemic and everything else has kind of shown us, is that now people are kind of, their perception of everything kind of has been dialed down. They don't need those big shiny offices anymore. Everyone prefers working from home. It's a little more casual. So don't invest in things until you absolutely have to. And then also too, one of my, even when it came to like buying new equipment, one of the best pieces of advice I got was like, before you buy a new computer, like, think about, give it a couple weeks. So if you want to buy that newest computer, or the newest phone, or whatever else, because it's got everything else, it's like, give it a couple weeks. Like, think about buying it, but think about buying it every day. But sort of like, do you need that? Like, oh, is this going to make my life exponentially better, today? Like, do I really, is my life less, or not life, but sort of, is my business suffering from this? Am I spending less time doing this? Is it taking away from what I could be doing? Like, and that's that measure where, as designers, we all want the most beautiful, shiny, newest things. And it's kind of, that was one of the biggest things. It's just sort of like, just keep asking or keep reassessing it. And then, 9 times, my mentor, they know it's like 9 times out of 10, you don't ever really need it. And, and that investment can go somewhere else that's, probably going to have more impact than getting a new computer, or you can invest in more ads, or do things that are going to get more return on investment than just, having maybe a small bump in productivity. So that, for me, when scaling, is probably the most, biggest thing, is just really hold off into the last moment. But then, even if you, that's assess it, constantly assess if you really need it. Because one of the things that, we've also found as an agency is that, the small, scrappy kind of, like, the people with, sometimes, I don't want to say that the smallest budgets tend to be the most creative, when it comes to it. And they also last the longest, because they know how to spend money, and they know how to invest the dollars to get the most out of them. Yeah. Whereas, companies that get invested, that have money, they just tend to, it's the spray and pray approach to everything. They just kind of, it is, they're just spending it everywhere without any kind of really strategic insight, because they can just keep money until they burn through it. But it's, the smaller, scrappier ones that kind of have less, that you can see, like, they can, then it almost becomes part of their DNA as a company too, kind of like, we're going to keep on, this work this way, this model where it's like, hey, let's really strategically think where we're going to invest in. And I got to say, something that really kind of came up the other day that I don't think it's talked about enough either, is like, reporting or getting the feedback, or getting, when you do something in the market, put in those things to understand what the impact was. Get the numbers, get the sort of assessment of, like, what impact did it have? Thankfully, social media, we can see how many impressions it has, and we can do that modeling. But do the modeling over, a longer term, not just 1 or 2 days, but do it over a month. But track that, right? And that sort of doing, when you can kind of measure things, then you can kind of know how to tweak things, and how to kind of, that's a big thing when it comes to scale, so that how to move things around. That's probably the key things for us, is learning to track, what was going to be positive, what was negative, and then keep on dialing up on those positive things. So
very, very true. And I love that you touched upon a lot of stuff that normally, if you've never really grown a business, you wouldn't really learn or wouldn't really know. Yeah. I like the analogy also of, like, make sure that you actually want that shiny thing, especially if I understand for, like, designers, like, you want that best tool to make sure that your creativity basically comes out in the best way. But it's also there's an adage that I love telling people as well, and to myself, is basically buy it nice or buy it twice. And it's the same thing of, like, you want to make sure that it's actually the right thing. And I love also that perspective of essentially kind of the small business owner mindset of, like, I want to have an ROI versus, like, of course, like the bigger corporations, where it's like, oh, I just want to, like, get this done. Like, I don't even want to look at it, which is for you. And you're like, yeah. I want this to be the best for you. I want this to look good for you. So I like that contrast as well. So then for you, what were your blind spots? Like, to cheekily refer to your book, what were your major blind spots, either as a marketer or a business owner, or just in life as you've kind of been figuring this out as you go?
Yeah, some really key ones too. I think it would be kind of really relevant to your audience. Is that at the beginning, I did not spend enough time interviewing or really doing research with my contractors, when it comes to the printers, or you talked about referrals before. It's kind of, I did not, when you get a referral from somebody, it's like, oh, so-and-so is a web designer, or so-and-so is like a logo designer, or, so you end up sort of, because it was a referral,
just trust
you just take it and use it. Yeah. And that's kind of, either that. So one thing is one side of that is referral of like, it's just, so you can, there's lots of people out there that do this. And actually just one of the key things in Blindspots that I got caught up in, probably more times than I care to think is do your interview, like do the research, do the interviews, and really hire them as though you're hiring an employee, as though you're really, we spend so much more time, interviewing, employees than we do contractors that we're probably paying more for, right? And, that probably going to have that larger impact. And one of the things that it came up is that when you look at hiring and when you're talking to people, get referrals from them, from their past clients, especially when it comes to design or anything else. It's like, we can have these now beautiful portfolios, and we can now, like, everything on Instagram and everything else. It's just, we don't like all the really visual candy that's out there that someone can show about the work that they did, might not be a true representation of what the outcome of the project is.
Yeah.
And think about design. If one of the things that maybe people miss with design, it's like, as nice as it can look, it also really has to perform the way that you want it to as well, and that's really key. So when I say referrals, when it comes to, I'm going to use like branding or brochures or things like that, or even web, ask for their past clients and see what their work experience was like. So if they can't, like, again, huge red flags, if they can't provide any, okay, let me preface this. If they've been in the industry for as long, like, 5 to 7 years, and they can't provide any referrals, massive red flag. Yeah. But honestly, if they've been in the industry about a year, you kind of know what you're going to get. They might have, they might be working on a bunch, but honestly, everything from, let's say, 2 to 5 years, and they can't provide any referrals, massive red flag, because you probably know that none of those projects turned out well. The relationship maybe went sour. They didn't finish them the way they should have. And honestly, that's you're probably going to be left in the same spot their past clients, were left in, and that's probably one of those key things. And then another huge blind spot is probably when it comes to design and editing is find someone to edit, find someone beyond yourself to kind of look at stuff, especially if it's being printed. I get PTSD every time I think about it, but I printed a really big brochure. It was like a provincial brochure. So we printed like 20,000 copies of this. It was a tourism brochure, and it was probably a $12,000 print job. And I did not get a sign off from the client, the last sign off on the print proof from the client. And there was a phone number on the back that was wrong. So yes, so that for me was a huge lesson learned of, like, everything went well up until that last moment of getting that sign off. So for me, the printer took pity, but that was the revenue of that entire project gone for me, going back into printing, into reprinting it because I didn't get that sign off. So really, one of the things I would always sort of, and it comes with everything in life. It's like, take it right to the finish line. Like, don't cut those corners, like really, finish strong, make sure that all those little things are done. Don't sort of like, get soft and wishy-washy near the end like I did. Like, I'm like, okay, it's all good, and just kind of kept running with it without really getting that sign off and having that checklist. And again, that's such a big part of this. One of the biggest things of this book is kind of like, there's checklists and there's things like in process, like, for a reason. And that's kind of, take it right to the end, so that, understand everything, know everything, and like, just, finish strong with a project, and don't sort of, just make sure it's all done. And here's another really big thing. If you don't know, ask. There's nothing, there's no such thing as a stupid question. That's the biggest thing that, and if they can't answer it, there's a little bit of a red flag too, but just ask the question of, like, what do I need to know to make sure this is going to be, that this is going to be the best thing I can. So, just as a client, who's hiring somebody that's, working these last little, if you're just trying to finish something up or whatever else, just keep on asking questions and have them, the contractor, help you fill you in and things like that. And if they don't know, again, one of those other big red flags, that it will land in that world of assumptions that, it could be damaging to yourself or the other the contractor. So either or, that's some of the big things.
Very, very true. I love that both ends. It's really just like even the finish strong. It's minimizing all those assumptions. Like it's from the freelancers or the people that you work with. It's minimizing the assumption that they know what they're supposed to be doing. It's the same thing on like as the service provider end. You're also minimizing the assumptions of like what the client wants. You'd rather get it up to a T. It's either it's probably not a stupid question. It's probably an expensive question. Like if you don't ask it, then it'll be that double. It'll be double the headache.
It really is. That's exactly right. It is, and that's sort of if you don't ask, chances are it's probably it could be getting expensive. So that's for sure. And that sort of and these are it's kind of like those things in school that we never kind of learn. Like we don't learn about finances in school or balancing book, all those things that life rules that we should learn in school. And there's in design school we didn't learn about business, about contracts, about all those things that basically will cost you time and money and in relationships and things like that. The things that kind of are the big things in life or the big things when it comes to your business. Because it just if you mess up and you could just here's another big thing. If you don't have a good relationship with your client and you mess up horribly, well, you've just lost a client, and you've lost that revenue, and it's just what's that? Sorry.
They'll tell other people, basically their network, that's kind of the domino effect.
100%. And they always say the cost of getting a new client is exponentially more than keeping one, right? So and that's that's something that I've learned to also, I shouldn't say my blind spots, but something I've learned in business is just be humble and be kind of like if you mess up, just call it out first and foremost. Be like, so sorry, I'll take care of this, and just really provide as much sort of service as you can to fix it. And that for me has always lasted in the it's turned out because clients will appreciate that too. Because it comes down to we all make mistakes, so one of those things. But just make sure that be humble about it, and kind of it's sort of call it out, call yourself out, aim to fix it, but fix it and then some. And that for me has always been because again, as well, it's like it's a lot of this stuff it's relationship business. So the better relationship you can have, the more if you have a problem and you can fix it tenfold, then you come out of that and everybody's like, hey, this has happened, and look, we went from not only did he fix it, but then sort of like
everything else happened.
He excelled, or sort of like it just he made this whole situation even better and then some. And that was, that speaks volume to everybody, just, in the way of, how you work and your ethics and everything else like that. So that's key.
Very, very cool. Well, speaking of tenfold, you've given me the perfect leeway to our favorite question here at the podcast, which is basically, if we were to able to duplicate you, like if we were, AI or science or wherever has gotten further enough where we're able to duplicate a Brady or have 10, 20, 300, a whole army of you basically, and you could be doing whatever it is that you want to, how would you want to influence the world? Like how would you, being cheeky, like how would you scale yourself basically with an army of yous?
Awesome questions. Well, I think there's two sides of this. If I were to be, I wouldn't say self-centered in this, but for myself, I am so innately curious about everything, and I would just want to take 100 of myself and just like spread it over the world and go to every museum, see every, just be involved and just be kind of experience as much as the world as I possibly can. And that's kind of that for me would just, because there's way too much to see in a lifetime, and that's massive. So, from a personal standpoint, that would be amazing. But also, I think, partly why I wrote this book is I just really get a lot of joy from teaching. And I think, there's also that we all know as entrepreneurs those gaps, and we kind of wish that we kind of could educate or sort of we want to kind of give back so that again people don't people won't make the same mistakes we have. So
Yeah.
To be altruistic in this, I would actually just want to be out there in front of as many entrepreneurs and teaching these things, learning new blind spots, and keep this entire sort of series going. And I've got more books on the way because I'm going to keep expanding it because, every area of business has got them. And that's kind of, so I think just being able to kind of create more of this content so that, more people can have, more success in their business and not get tripped up by all the blind spots that they're out there.
Very, very cool. And I did see that on your Amazon page of like book one of like, ooh, it's going to be more books. It's very, very exciting. Yeah. So how can people follow you? How can people find out more about like future books that you do? How can people like connect with you?
It's two places where I kind of, that are probably the easiest. I am on LinkedIn quite a bit. So that's kind of, so LinkedIn is probably one of my main channels. I love it because it's, people can ask me business questions. I'm actually posting up content there. New tips and everything else as I'm learning. So there's always a steady stream. And I've also got a newsletter that I've just launched with books that I'm loving to read, and people are sort of supporting that. So LinkedIn, just Brady Dahmer on LinkedIn is a pop up right away. That's probably the easiest. And then Blindspotshandbook.com is the URL to kind of pick up the book. And it's available on Amazon. So I do have it's self-published, as international as I can be. So hopefully it's available in whatever region or area that the listeners in. But that's probably the easiest place. So Blindspotshandbook.com is where they can grab the book and find me on LinkedIn. And also one of the things that someone reached out and said, hey, I've got some questions. I'm in a little bit of a sticky situation here. Can you help me? And that also too gave me a little bit of an idea. So whereas if any of your listeners have any kind of sticky situations when it comes to working with contractors in the marketing, branding, illustration, photography world, hit me up on LinkedIn and just give me your situation. And I'm more than happy to kind of jump in and kind of mentor you through the problem, kind of suggest how I would sort of deal with it and give you any tools or insights that I can in that. So just hit me up and follow me, and let's and also if you have your own blind spots, if you have something, feel free to share them, because there are more books coming, and the more I have, the more I'll document, the more I'll share, and the more we can learn.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Brady, for being on. Looking forward to seeing more of those books.
Awesome, Leanne. It was such a great experience. And I love talking about marketing. So anytime you want to be back, more than happy to kind of come in and
on your next book, for sure.
For sure.
Again, all of Brady's links are going to be found in the description below. Make sure to follow him, find him, and follow him through his journey in writing all of his series. And feel free to comment any questions you have for him as well below. If you guys liked this episode, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button right there. Hit subscribe wherever you're watching or listening this from, so you don't miss any of the future episodes of the Scale You podcast. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. And remember that small steps matters. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.